Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on February 20th, 2024. This meeting included comments and discussion about leasing golf carts for the city's Parks Department, funding improvements to a pedestrian path in the Dickon neighborhood, approving a 16-story development next to the downtown library, removing a requirement for buffers between zoning districts, and amending the early leasing ordinance. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on February 20th, 2024. There was one split vote on a budget amendment to fund golf carts. All other agenda items were approved unanimously. You can find this voting chart and more information about this meeting at A2Council.com. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. The meeting included a presentation from Matt Carpenter of the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority.
As I think we're all aware, the MDOT, Michigan DOT, is currently conducting a study of the US 23 on the east side of Ann Arbor. All of their options at this point really involve widening the highway. This body yourself several weeks ago passed a resolution asking MDOT not to widen the highway. We have offered to assist Michigan DOT with creating a scenario in their study, in addition to the widening options, which they're welcome to consider. Also, please consider a transit solution. We have specific ideas for that. And the one slide here that I'll share with you, I think encapsulates that general idea. You see in the map a vision of large park and rides about one or two freeway interchanges out from the Ann Arbor ring. Coincidentally, the ones on US 23 north and south and on M14 and I-94 to the east could also be used as intercept park and ride lots to intercept commuters before they enter the US 23 corridor, and then we can bus them in to Ann Arbor, thereby reducing pressure on the US 23 segment, which is what MDOT says they're trying to do.
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for less than 40 minutes. 12 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 7 people spoke to topics on the agenda. The consent agenda this week included 10 items and expenditures of almost $9 million. 3 items were pulled for discussion. Council considered a budget amendment to fund a 4-year lease of golf carts and utility vehicles, as well as the purchase of 2 mowers. This equipment will be used at Huron Hills and Leslie Park golf courses. City staff offered explanation, addressing council concerns about the use of gas and the added expense of GPS units.
We put out a bid for gas golf carts this year, and we just do not have the infrastructure currently to house that many electric golf carts. It's not just a matter of housing the golf carts, but it's also the electrical infrastructure to then charge those golf carts. The customers are pretty much expecting to have those GPS units on the golf carts. They also help us control the pace of play by the clubhouse being able to track where the golfers are on the course and be able to track down problems.
Council discussed it for about 7 minutes.
Considering we know the maintenance is minimal, there's no need to fill up with gas.
Something that I can vote for is the fact that we're not purchasing this equipment and that it's a lease as opposed to, but we need to identify for the future how we're either going to get that infrastructure there for housing and charging, and how we're going to, appropriately charge the users of the golf courses to accommodate that infrastructure in the future.
In the only split vote of the night, Council voted 7-4 in support of the budget amendment. Budget amendments require 8 votes for approval, so it was defeated. Council then considered a development agreement for 333 East William Street. This project is the current site of a credit union next door to the downtown library. The development will be a 16-story residential tower with 206 units and 704 beds. The agreement includes 2 payments from the developer, a contribution of about $125,000 to the Parks Department, and a little over $250,000 for the removal of metered parking spots at Library Lane. When this project was first proposed, developers were ready to comply with city requirements for the inclusion of affordable housing or financial support for affordable housing. The project now includes neither because these requirements were repealed by City Council. Earlier in the meeting, public commenters spoke to the issue of housing.
We need a strategy and incentives to encourage acceptance and commitment to long-term affordability. ownership is a critical element of affordability, and clearly the citizens of Ann Arbor support the creation of more affordable housing. Just look at the millage that was passed.
There's a lot of discussion, longer than we have time for right now, about the merits of the recent changes in the law. So let's assume that they were correct. It just happens to be a bit of timing that Core Spaces is able to build what they were going to build and not contribute to the Affordable Housing Fund. They did say that they might have had some trouble financing it if they had to follow the old rules. I question that logic. My experience as a developer, you don't usually get that far in the process without knowing that you can finance the project.
Council discussed it for about 3 minutes and focused on whether bike lanes would remain functional during construction.
The amendment that I'd like to propose for consideration is that we would include language that says all reasonable attempts will be made to avoid closure of the William Street Bikeway during construction.
I'm just thinking, should we ask for staff advice on that or not?
I think there's some flexibility there in the language if there's a need for temporary closures.
By friendly amendment, language was added regarding the bike lane, and the development agreement was approved unanimously. Council then considered the allocation of $140,000 to cover the cost of preliminary design for an improved pedestrian path in advance of negotiating a city easement and application for grants to fund repairs. This path runs between the end of Runnymede Boulevard and Pauline Boulevard in Ward 4. It is used by families walking to Dickin Elementary School and neighborhood residents walking to bus stops on Pauline. This path is located on private property at Walden Hills Condominiums. The condo community of Walden Hills is relatively affordable owner-occupied housing. The path itself runs between Walden Hills and the much more expensive single-family homes on Runnymede, Suffolk, and Norfolk. This path appears in a comprehensive transportation plan approved unanimously by Council in 2021. It is marked as a proposed route rather than an existing one because it is not currently a public right-of-way. Voters in Ann Arbor have consistently supported the community value of well-maintained public rights-of-way and city investment in them. In 2011, voters approved a millage for the city to maintain public sidewalks, acknowledging this community value. In 2020, voters approved a millage to pay for new sidewalks for residents living in single-family homes adjacent to this path. These millages pay to maintain the sidewalks on their property. In 2022, as an elected representative for Ward 4, and with the help of city staff, I put a resolution on a council agenda directing first steps to negotiate an easement so that this path would be eligible for grant funding and could be improved as a public right-of-way. Ahead of public discussion of that resolution at a meeting, Councilmember Jen Iyer posted on social media, arguing repeatedly that the city should not take responsibility for this path, that an easement was not necessary, and that condo residents should pay for the path's improvement. She encouraged others to attack anyone else who saw the community value of supporting these improvements. The worst of this was quickly edited or deleted. The firestorm led by Councilmember Iyer was so extreme, I withdrew the resolution. At the council meeting on May 5, 2022, Iyer expressed satisfaction at having blocked a city easement to improve this path as a public right-of-way.
I'd like to address an item that's been removed from the agenda. DC4 would have authorized city staff to negotiate an easement to take over a dilapidated asphalt connector pathway through Walden Village condos in Ward 4. Now that the resolution has wisely been withdrawn, I understand from Mr. Dohoney that staff is free to restart discussions with the condo association to resolve these infrastructure needs creatively.
This week, Council considered the same plan from 2 years ago. The funding in CA6 anticipates a city easement and grant funding to improve the path. City staff explained.
For the case of the Pauline-Runnymede Path, if the existing path were city-owned, it would be a high priority for replacement based on its very poor condition. And would be paid for through the street bridge and sidewalk millage. However, since there's no existing funding source that would be eligible to use under the existing circumstances there, the city is seeking to apply for a grant to help offset the cost of that project.
Earlier in the meeting, a resident offered public comment.
Setting a precedent which summarily relieves these property owners, often we're talking big corporate landlords, of their continuing obligation to maintain these pathways would be doing a huge disservice to our community and to the taxpayers of the city.
The community of city residents at Walden Hills are not corporate landlords. Their residents collectively pay for maintenance on 50-year-old buildings, as is true for the much more expensive single-family homes on neighboring Runnymede, Norfolk, and Suffolk. The developer of Walden Hills left decades ago. Talking points from 2 years ago included similar misunderstanding. In 2022, Councilmember Iyer insisted that an easement was not necessary in order to get grant funding. City staff has now clarified that the opposite is true. This week, both council representatives for Ward 4 argued that the residents in these condos should pay for public infrastructure that their wealthier neighbors do not.
How much the condo association can or will pay for remains to be seen, and staff are working with them on this.
In order to qualify for those grants, the city does need to have some level of financial input, and so therefore I'm supportive of this plan because it allows this critical pathway to be fixed as quickly as possible in a manner that is right and fair and as consistent as possible.
After almost 2 years' delay, Council unanimously approved allocating $140,000 towards establishing a public right-of-way for improvements at Runnymede and Pauline. No one spoke at a public hearing for an ordinance amendment that will eliminate a conflicting land use buffer between residential zoning districts. Council discussed it for about 3 minutes.
Conflicting land use buffers can end up requiring as much as 30 feet of space between buildings if both of the buildings are required to provide a buffer. This is a waste of land at a time when we are trying to make efficient use of open land. So the amendment would remove the requirement to provide a conflicting land use buffer between parcels.
The amendment was approved unanimously. Council then considered an amendment to the city's early leasing ordinance, which includes a qualified right to renew for current tenants. Amendments will clarify the timeline for offering lease renewal. Changes will prohibit offering an apartment to a new tenant unless the landlord has just cause for failing to renew the lease of a current tenant. Earlier in the meeting, a representative from the Washtenaw Area Apartment Association spoke.
We believe that the current residents should have the ability to waive their right to renew, allowing their apartments to be shown in the fall. This provision would protect them from intrusive showings during exam times in the spring, especially for senior students and others who do not intend to renew their leases.
Other commenters supported the changes.
At least half the residents of Ann Arbor are renters, and that they are in the low power position amongst landlords, and I say that as a landlord. I'm a small business person, so I don't have the same issues that some of the large ones do, so I won't try to speak to their needs, but I appreciate you respecting the fact that the renters should be listened to.
Council discussed the amendments for about 10 minutes.
This ordinance amendment is intended to close some of the existing loopholes that have been identified in ELO and right to renew, strengthen the city's ability to enforce the law, and reestablish tenants' rights in areas where some landlords have clearly violated the spirit, if not the letter of the law. Some landlords have started to contact tenants months before they are allowed to solicit them to renew their leases, threaten huge rent increases if tenants don't renew by a deadline that is also far earlier than the timeline established by law, and then offer those same tenants the opportunity to renew early to lock in their current price or a lesser increase. The changes tonight will also clarify and add to the list of required information that landlords must include in a written rental offer, including a requirement that the landlord list all changes in the terms and conditions from the current lease and the price of rent and any fees.
The ordinance amendments were approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, they will be subject to a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Without discussion, Council unanimously approved $150,000 in legal services to support property interests, such as the acquisition of easements and condemnation litigation. Finally, Council considered a resolution reiterating current Council policy for city hiring practices that do not discriminate against people with a history in the criminal justice system. That policy has been in place since 2014. Earlier in the evening, commenters spoke in support of the resolution.
So resolutions like this not only set the table for the city, which is obviously a good job to have and something that somebody can build a life on and something that they can actually become a homeowner and productive member of their community. But it also provides a generational component that is often missing from reentry after incarceration.
So I know Ann Arbor is a champion of trying to give second chances to people that's been incarcerated. I do know that. I followed your instructions. I did exactly what you told me to do. I filled out my applications. I did everything. I started working for the city of Ann Arbor in Parks and Recreation. It changed my life.
Council made statements in support for about 5 minutes.
This resolution makes our commitment to fair chance hiring even stronger, building on the efforts of the 2014 Council to be more inclusive and equitable in hiring, especially for those with criminal records.
The resolution was approved unanimously. The meeting adjourned at about 8:45 p.m. without any additional public comment. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
But there's still going to be buffering between parking lots and refuse containers. That's correct? Okay, that was my only question.
Yes.